For this first part of the session, I'm going to be focused on being able to rapidly produce scenarios in mineSched. This is one of the key advantages we have in mineSched. And the reason why this is so successful is for a few reasons. First of all, mineSched is really straightforward to use. It follows a logical sequence moving from the geology, defining the geology, through to setting up the schedule, creating schedule, and then once you're happy and iterating through those parts of the process, you go through to publishing your results based on what you're happy with. So it works best when we iterate through really quickly and start driving results. And just to get started, it all pivots around the block model. Now, mineSched can be considered a block scheduler. So the block model is the sole source of truth. And so to make sure that we keep on top of the block model being correct and we don't end up with bad results, the first thing I wanted to point out when we bring through a block model, we've got this handy refresh tool. If a change is made to the source file at any point, we open up the scenario, it recognizes a change has been made, and we've got the choice there to refresh and push that core information. And that goes all the way through the schedule to make sure that no one's going to run a schedule based on old data. It's going to be able to be refreshed at any stage. You've got a choice in that. You also won't end up in a situation where you are unaware that changes have been made and you get results that don't match your expectations. So important here, the block model just simply has to have blocks that are flagged with a material class attribute. It's preferable to have a density. So it's very simple there. The blocks can be flagged with 0, 1 or 2, in this case here for low grade and high grade ore. But this could be as simple or complex as you wish it to be. Often there you can differentiate lots of different types of waste, different types of ore. It could be oxide, sulfide, whatever you need to be. So this can be as simple or as complex as you wish it to be. I know some people just go with a simple ore and waste breakdown for when keeping it very simple. You can have multiple commodities, and we can here support partial attributes. So a block can be made up of a number of different material types, and each block, each with its associated qualities. So we can cover a really wide range of scenarios. And the other thing people love is the auditability of it. So at any stage here, looking at the geology, we can see what we're dealing with. It looks at the whole block, everything in the block model, and breaks it down based on our material types and qualities that we've defined. So we're going to focus just on the higher level the scheduling at this stage. And that's looking at each pit in its entirety. And mineSched I'd say it's the market leader in terms of being able to break something down into benches without having to do a lot of pre-work. So it's simple as defining where the bench is in terms of the block. And look, I'm just taking a step back. A lot of this comes down to how the block model is set up. We want to have, for this to be successful, we should have this model as an engineering model, preferably regularized, and with the block height being matching the bench height for the surface mine. So if we've got that set up, it's a simple matter of defining the first and last bench elevation, defining the bench height, and setting a direction. The block size, mineSched can also consolidate block sizes, so we can make really small blocks larger and just to blend them together. So again, this is really makes things quick. So if we keep this a practical size that we can work with, it makes, and I'll explain this a bit later, this is as simple as it is. And in each pit here, we use a constraint file or the combination of a topography and a pit design to flag which blocks belong to this pit. So we can have this can be as simple or as complex as you wish it to be. Define the material movements. Each material type must have a destination. So if it doesn't have a destination, it's not going to be mined. So here we've got the low grade and high grade stockpiles which feed the processing plant. And we'll go through a bit more detail of the processing stage here, but this is the rate per day. And once we've got a location set up, this is what people really appreciate, is being able to see it. At each elevation here, we can see exactly what's there. We see how much waste, how much ore is present at each bench elevation, and we can audit that. So it's very transparent, open. There's a range, we've got precedences here, but in this case here, I'm going to use my production rates to drive the sequence of the schedule. So one thing I love about mineSched, to get things started really quickly, we can define one unit that can be treated as a fleet. So in this case here, we've got a capacity and a production rate. If the capacity is, for example, twice the production rate, then it means you're going to be able to, mineSched will recognize that unit as being 2 production units, because we can match there. You can see there that the maximum capacity, we wish that to be achieved. So if this is this production rate is half the value of the capacity, it recognizes there's 2 units. So without having to go set up all these different resources here, you can model multiple resources really easily in mineSched. For the parameters, we can apply really practical things here to control how many active benches and lag distances between benches. So these are key practicality and safety considerations, just to make sure that we don't end up with that each bench being mined in a way which is just not going to be practical. So in this case here, I'm going to say I don't wish to be opening up any more than 3 benches per period of scheduling, and I want to keep a 80 meter distance between each working bench, just to give us a safe and practical working distance between shovels at different benches. So now we can go and check the results and start creating some schedules. So as we want to first check the animation canvas. So this reporting, dashboard reporting section is our way to validate the schedule and then check the results and make sure we're happy with it before we go and start the reporting process. So we can see clearly here that we've got only 3 benches active at any one time, and we've got an 80 meter buffer that's maintained. So we're pretty happy with that. Okay, so I can go through and check here my results. So maybe hard to see, but we've got a growing grade here. We can get through to about halfway through the mine life is we're getting some quite high grade material before a tailor's often just sitting around just under one gram per ton of gold. So some of the key things I want to demonstrate here are what happens if we change the mining direction. Now, if I went to try to do that in, say, DesWeek or one of the other packages, I know what the work would be. We'd have to go through and do a lot of pre-work to achieve this, because likely the mining blocks would have to change. There'd be a range of work that's required to be able to achieve this. So if I want to say I want to try this east for the West Pit. So what happens if I change that mining direction? Do I get a better result? Maybe I can get some more of that high grade deposit early. So if I want to run that, it's a very simple process to do. So we can see here, we've got the mining directions changed. So it's a very different approach. And you can see here that our process plant is not operating at its full capacity, and we see a dramatic drop off in grade. So a lot of waste mining is happening at the start. So that's not going to be delivering something which we're going to be happy with. So we can shift it back quickly and generate the results. So as you can see here, because it's so quick, we can go back here and we're not stuck with the north, south, east, west. We can use radial, there's roaming, there's azimuth. So pick up a certain azimuth here. So that it really opens mineSched up to creating more optimal results. It's not an optimization process, but we can use, and I'm sure there's going to be other use cases demonstrated of combining mineSched with Simulio eyesight and things like that. It can be run headless. We can change this. We can look at it. What if we run through 100 different scenarios with a range of azimuth results? What does that do to our schedule? We can do that. It's something really powerful, but it all stems from how simple and intuitive mineSched is to use. It's so quick. You can set up and then check your reports. You've got a lot of information that is very easy to set up and consume before we go through to generating reports and kind of locking in and communicating that schedule. Okay, for part 2 of this presentation, I want to be talking first about some hot off the press new work that will be available in the upcoming mineSched 2026 release. So the mineSched 2026 release is all about managing processing waste and reporting on your finished product. So we put a lot of work into this, and you can see there'll be 2 new tabs that have been added to the processing plant tab. The first one here is about the recovery factors. So being able to focus on what the recovery we could expect from the processing plant. So I've kept it very simple. We can set a flat processing recovery factor irrespective of what our input is, or we could use in a recovery expression which can vary. So we can see here we've got an example on the tooltip here. So we can actually vary the recovery factors based on the input grades that are coming into the processing plant. So I've kept it simple, but importantly here, for the first time on mineSched, we're going to be able to quantify what our units are. So for gold here, we're interested in grams per tonne, but if it was copper, it'd be percent. If it was mineral sands, it could be parts per million and things like that. So we've got a good cross-section of units that we could apply depending on what the quality unit is. And for reporting, we don't want to have to report on tonnes and go through the conversion process to troy ounces. So for gold, if we want to report our finished product in troy ounces, this is now an option and it does it for us. So there's very little work to do here going forward. And on the processing waste, we've got the ability to define how much of our process waste tailings, which will be going to the brand new tailings dam object on the 2D canvas. So if we're saying 80% here, 80% of our processing waste is going to be reported to tailings dam with a moisture content percentage of 80%. The rest of this material is going to be reporting to our solid process waste stockpile. Now this opens up some great opportunities here to look at other ways we could use this waste. So I know we could, for tailings dams here, we could look at this material here, could be converted into paste fill to go underground for stope fill and things like that. So there's a lot of great opportunities here, but most importantly, most of the material which passes through the processing waste needs to be safely managed. We can start doing this now. So while it doesn't have spigot point planning and things like that just yet, we can set our capacities for the tailings dam and use date events to vary this over the duration of the schedule if we're going to stage our tailings dam design. And also we've got slurry going in, and also we can consider water loss due to evaporation and strategic dewatering programs we might put in place to return water back to the processing plant for reuse as well. So we've got total capacity, slurry going in, water going out as part of our planning process. And this new icon here, it's our production stockpile. So there's nothing that's going to be, this will appear as soon as we put a recovery factor in, and this just demonstrates to the mine planner that there is now products that are being produced, and we can track that. So now we can go and create a schedule. We can create some new reports. So there's a recovered metal and there's a processed waste management tab. So if we go by destination here, we can see how much material is being stored as solid waste. And we can see with what our balance of our tailings dam is. You can see here what our volume is, volumes and tons coming into the tailings dam, how much water is leaving for each period, and we can go through and see it's a cumulative total here. We can start to see what our capacity is of our dam at any point in time. So really important consideration. Our tailings dams are important to understand what we're dealing with and making sure that our tactical mine plan is able to be supported by the tailings dam capacity. And we can also start to see for the first time what our recovered gold is. So per period, we can go and see exactly what sort of products we could start to consider. Now, this is a key input there into our financial planning as well and forecasting of what sort of product we might be dealing with. Future work in the space, the next stage in the next refresh release is going to be focused on concentrate definition. So we can, rather than just looking at recovered metal, we can focus on what most mines produce is a concentrate. Okay, along with the ability to track this, we consider our variability we've got here in our input grades feed to the plant. This high variability here is not always going to be desirable. Many processing plants can be quite sensitive to the feed grades. So one of the really important values to understand about mineshed is the ability to be able to smooth this out when possible. This is through the use of targets. So targets can be set as material ratio targets. If we've got a stockpile, we're looking to blend material. Or in this case here, we're wanting to achieve as close to 1.2 grams per tonne as possible, considering everything that's available. So in each period of time, MineShed's got the ability to go back through to that source block model and work out what is available for selection and what are the best blends of high and low grade ore that we would send through these stockpiles and then drawn into the plant to be able to achieve that desired outcome. So if we go and create the schedule here, and we can go and check the results. There's certainly still variability, and you can see here there's going to be points in time in this current mine plan that it's not possible to achieve this, and so there's certain periods of time where we're not delivering, so there's quite low grade. At points in time, you can see here, broadly, most of the time we're able to achieve bang on that 1.2 grams per tonne feed to the plant. So there may be work we could do in this space to smooth this out, but on the whole, this is something there that is going to, if it's followed, it's possible there that we could consider a very consistent feed grade to the plant, which we would consider our recovered metal and our the recovery factors that we apply are going to give us our best recovery of metal. So this is one of the key things that differentiates MineShed. That's a really compelling value that considering for both the feed grade of the plant and maintaining the quality targets at your production stockpiles that you wish to plan for. Now, there's lots and lots of other things I could talk about, but for the sake of time, the last thing I want to discuss is the 18-month roadmap for MineShed. Now, people may have heard that all the focus is going on the platform. MineShed has a good, healthy, long life ahead of it, and we are very much committed to continued growth for this very competitive product in the market today. So just to focus on the next couple of releases. So as I mentioned in the presentation, I covered there the 2026 release, which is focused on modelling processing waste, setting up tailings dams, and being able to showcase and report on the recovered commodity. So the initial feedback is very positive in this. I really appreciate those who are going to take the time to beta test this before the release comes out on the 9th of January next year for the general public. That will be should be a good release. Now for the MineSched 2027 release, we've got two major themes that we're going to be focusing on. The first one is a revamp of the custom reporting capabilities. It's a very popular tool. The tool's pretty good at the moment. It allows a fair bit of flexibility. You can set up templates to be able to reproduce reports in a format that people want, and lots of people use it. It's not as usable as it could be, and it's lacking some key things like being able to use expressions as part of the reporting workflow. So we've reviewed the competitor solutions out in the market, and we've got some ideas on how that can be improved and refreshed. So that's one of the key focuses we've got. Now, for the 2027 release and probably continuing onwards for the next few releases is going to be a big push on the progression of the haulage tools in MineSched. If you talk to many of the surface mines about what the major blocker they would have, especially those who are haulage constrained, about why they may not use MineSched compared to some of our competitors, it would be haulage. A lot of consultants love MineSched's haulage capabilities because it does provide a great deal of flexibility if you don't have a fixed fleet and you wish to know how many trucks you would need to support your operation, then MineSched does a good job. If you've got a haulage fleet, that becomes a bit more problematic. So being able to manage the productivity of your shovels based on your haulage fleet, especially as the pit gets deeper, that's something that we're working on being able to achieve. So that's haulage constrained production scheduling. But the journey starts next in the 2027 release. So there's a few things we're looking at. First of all is improving our truck library and expanding it to being a mining resource library. So being able to import in truck specification PDF files to be able to have some text recognition, to be able to populate key fields through importing the PDF file. And during that process, we wish to give people the option of directly reading from a Rimple curve rather than having to forcing people to set up a table. So still keeping the table, because Rimple tables can be handy if you've got your own measurements you wish to put in. But most people just expect to see a curve and to be able to have the velocities worked out from the curve in the solution. So those are the three key things we've got focused on for the MineSched 2027 release. And beyond that, the other topics that we feel are really important. Spatial conformance to plan is an important one. What I mentioned before, the implementation of haulage constrained production scheduling. That's going to be a bit of a journey. That's a big step forward, but we're very much committed to making that happen. And being able to improve our ability to manage mine waste, especially with a focus of improving our workflows to enable progressive rehabilitation to happen. So that'll be really important. That was the feedback I've had for a lot of different consultants that manage the progressive rehabilitation projects, is how can we better classify our mining waste? How could we leverage our understanding of the deposit to be able to plan for where our high-risk products get placed in the context of the stockpile? So there are some of the immediate growth areas, but there's plenty of ways we could move forward with MineSched. I would really value getting some input from the field. I always appreciate hearing from the market what their needs are. So feel free, please, to reach out, and I really welcome feedback from the industry, from our consultants, and those that have got their ear to the ground in terms of what the pressing needs are in the market in the tactical mine planning space.